highly emotional and very lovely. And we've got another one that is, heads up, quite difficult, but is really, really important. And I want to introduce you to Paulina Odeth Flores Banuelos, who is an amazing person doing fabulous things, which are to do with refugees and migration and death and all of those things. And I will read that out for you so that you get more of a sense of what we're talking about, and then you can decide. I don't know where you are today, what you're doing, but it is obviously quite a tough one. I'm going to read out the name of the session first of all, Paulina, so that we know what people are looking for. So this one's on Friday. This one is Friday the 14th, Greenwich Mean Time, 3:45 till 4:30. But for Paulina, she's in Mexico, so you need to look at the international time zones. I don't know where you are, but they'll all be on the program. The session title is Death Across Borders. And I'm going to read you the session description so that you can see what I mean. I think it's just vital, vital work. It's probably something that many of us are not thinking about, or if we are, it's very distressing. We don't know what to do about it. So I think it's really lovely that there's a platform for this conversation. So death and migration are facts of human life which have shaped the story of human existence. However, modern responses to both of these fundamental processes have been to hide, reject, and vilify them. Even worse, when both processes coincide, the grief and trauma that each one brings are exacerbated. This presentation explores how we look at the deaths of migrants and refugees, particularly at border crossings, as well as the unique responsibility death care professionals have in addressing these deaths compassionately, irrespective of people's migration status. So this is really, really interesting because, first of all, many people are probably not thinking about it. If you don't work in any kind of death work, you're probably not thinking about what that means in practical terms, respecting religious beliefs, respecting the care of the body, where is home. There are so many issues around this that if you don't work in this kind of area will not probably occur to you. So I'm loving that this is coming out into the public arena. I'm going to quickly read about your bio, actually, because I think it sets the scene and it's really helpful. So Paulina majored in English literature from the National Autonomous University in Mexico, and she was granted a full ride scholarship. What does that mean?
That it was fully paid.
Fully paid scholarship, yeah. To undertake the joint master's degree in Crossways in cultural narratives at the University of Tübingen, Germany, the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland, and the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Oh my goodness. So in 2025, that's now, she became a children's book author with her first book, Bruno Dice, N-O. Bruno Dice. Can you say that for me?
Bruno siempre dice no.
There you go. That's what you meant.
I translate to Bruno always says no.
Bruno also always
no,
says
it's okay.
no.
Sorry.
I'm sorry for my Spanish speakers. I don't have any Spanish. If you'd been French, I would have been fine. Illustrated by Oscar.
No, totally my phones.
No, it isn't. I should know some Spanish. I haven't done my rehearsing. Her written and illustrated work has also been recently featured in Rethinking Refugees and Lazy Women. Fabulous title. So that's what we have before us. We have this vision of an individual who's done amazing things, learned incredible amounts of, knowledge and gone where many people will be unwilling to go on our behalf. So I do encourage you to appreciate her. She can be sitting in your living room with you and you can hear all the benefits of her wisdom and her knowledge. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. I think I managed to turn my microphone off before I sneezed. This is incredible to have you on the Lifting the Lid Festival. It's just fantastic. I would love to know what what you really, really, really want people to take away from this. You've got this platform, you'll be speaking to people who haven't given this very much consideration and those who have, and you'll be speaking to wider audiences and we don't know who they are yet. So
Uh,
there's an opportunity for you to say what you really need to have heard.
so I think what I think it's most important. I think can you hear me still? Sorry, I have bad connection, I think, and
I
it's
can
really
still hear
glitchy.
you,
Um,
Paulina. It's okay. It does glitch a little bit, but when I download it, it'll be fine.
oh,
So don't worry too much. I can hear you. I'll let
okay.
you know if I can't. You're fine.
Okay, perfect. So what I think it's important that people take away from this is that when people move from one place to another, when they migrate, they lose a lot of the fabric of life that's around them. And one of the things that they lose, it's the power to make decisions about what happens when they die. And not only in their own cases, to their own persons, but what happens when their families that they left behind die? What happens with their friends? What happens with that grief that doesn't have an outlet that most of us to enjoy, right? Like we do have a privilege, a lot of us to know that when the time comes, family is going to be around, the places that we know are going to be around for us to be interred in, and that doesn't happen in most of the cases of people who migrate from one way to another, and that's when we're talking about regular migration, as people call it. Um, but there's other types of migration where people have to flee their homes, where people have to seek asylum in another countries, where people have to be in an irregular status in another country, and then those rights to decide these kind of things at the end of life start to diminish. So that's what I want people to take away from this, that people lose a lot of these things, and in a lot of cases when we're talking about refugees and asylum seekers, these are the kind of difficult decisions that they had to consider when they decide to go from one place to another. It's not an easy decision, because I think a lot of people like to just brush under the rug all this matter and say, like, well, they decided to come here. What happens to them? It's none of my problem. But I think it should be, especially when these deaths occur at border sites or during border closings, because that's the responsibility of someone. Perhaps it's not directly yours, but it's the responsibility of the states that represent us.
So you have a really broad understanding of lots of different contexts actually from your work. I'm interested to know whether you have a particular example in mind that you might be able to share with people so we can make it very tangible.
Yeah, and maybe I can talk a little bit of where this idea came from, like the origins of why I wanted to talk about this. I was living in Poland in 2021, and that was the start of a crisis in the Polish-Belarusian border, where a lot of asylum seekers were trying to cross into the European Union. Um, and I think it was heartbreaking to see how little consideration people had for these people. Um, it was the start of winter, so a lot of people were dying just from the temperature, from the weather, from the conditions that they were in. And and talking to people, I think you expect a kind of empathy for them, because people are dying out there in the forest and no one is doing anything. um, and it was really hard not to get a reaction that kind of fits into what we think should be the reaction when someone dies, right? Like I think if I talk to you and I said a friend of mine died, and you said, like, well, that's what was supposed to happen. It's heartbreaking, right? And I don't know these people who were working to get aid to these people didn't know them. But I think it's a fact of human life to be empathetic to the situations of someone else, especially in these cases of mass tragedy. So I think that was one example in which I saw that there was a lot of misunderstanding about what an asylum seeker is. And I think a lot of people think that when someone is trying to cross a border, that gives states a kind of permission to enact a kind of power or enact violence upon them to the point of death, which was something that this is a very difficult topic, but something that I did hear a lot was, well, they shouldn't just shoot them, right? Like they are trying to enter our country. They have permission to do that. They don't. There are laws in place. There's international laws. There's the Convention for Refugees from 1951, the Protocol of 67. They all form a basis that protected asylum seekers from these kind of things. And I think a lot of people like to base the reaction on what they believe should happen, right? Like borders should be protected. Borders are there to be protected. But there are laws in place, and there should be human kindness that shouldn't tell us no one should die out in the open in their search for a better life. So that was an example that really brought to mind how when we are mourning people and we are talking about grief and we are talking about end of life decisions, that seems to go out of the window when we're talking about migrants, but specifically about asylum seekers that die at the borders, because people think that they don't have rights and they don't have that they shouldn't be mourned because they made a decision to be there, and that's not the case.
It's heartbreaking. It's just utterly heartbreaking. Are there organisations in place, and clearly this refugee organisation that you're talking about might be one of them? What is being done to address this tragic situation, and who are the organisations who are involved in trying to make a difference?
So I will definitely need to go back to you on that, because there are many organizations in Poland. There were a couple that I was closely following at the time. Rethinking Refugees it's a Polish base. Now it's more of an Indian based organization that I was writing for at the time, and they were doing a lot of what do you call it? Spraying information around about the situation. There were other organizations that were in the field that were at the border providing aid. I won't try to butcher their names because they were in Polish, but I can go back to you with that. And then
that was a really good idea,
in general, yeah. And then in general, there are other organizations that are working towards documenting deaths or disappearances at sea, in the U.S.-Mexico border, for example, in the deserts, in the West Saharan desert. So there are a lot of organizations that are working specifically to document these deaths and also the disappearances, because we know that in most cases, when a refugee or an asylum seeker disappears in a border, that means that's a kind of inconclusive death too. They're either dead physically or they are in a symbolic death in which they are disappeared. They may have been trafficked. They may be lost. So that's also a kind of death, essentially, that many organizations are trying to bring attention to.
I watched a film once, and I feel like it was called Khadija's Journey. I'm not sure. And it was about a woman trying to find the bones of her son or her nephew. She was trekking across Bosnia searching for this person. I never forgot that film. I cried. I used to work in a cinema, and I'd be absolutely inconsolable at the end of these films. I can't handle it at all. But I remember being very struck by the fact that she just could not rest until she'd found that person. And it might seem a bit alien to some people in my country, where they will say, oh, my body's not important, I don't care, just throw me out of the bins, it doesn't matter. First of all, that's very much a privileged position to be taking. We have the luxury of saying that. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I hate that phrase. But I can never really come back with that. But I do feel that very profoundly. But the thing is that in many, many cultures, our bodies are really important, and finding the body and knowing what to do with that person. And there's rules about it. There's cultural traditions and norms that make you feel safe. And what I always think about is the fact that people aren't getting to bury their dead in the way that is customary and feels honoring. And I wonder what is being done. Is there anything being done? Because I guess if you're trying to find people, and there are these charities who are trying to find people, that's the beginning of it, the beginning of the process of honoring. But I don't know what happens after that. Is there anything? Do we know?
Yes, there is. And actually, I do have to say that in Poland at the time, at least, there were a lot of people who were also trying to make a difference and trying to help people. And one of the ways that they did at the time, just normal citizens, was conducting funerals for those who had died at the border. And obviously, a lot of the casualties were Middle Eastern, were Muslims, and they were coming into a majorly Catholic country. But it was really special that there were Catholic people who were open to conduct these funerals and to do so in a culturally respectful way and in a religiously respectful way. There was I don't have the names right now, but there was a very small Muslim community at the border who were also trying to be involved with that and to give some place for the families to grieve. They were calling the families via video call and allowing people to have a final goodbye. And that's only on the human side, the individual side of civilians making the work. But there are also the people trying to obviously provide also a sense of closure for families. There are organizations conducting grief cycles so that people can connect from all parts of the world and talk about it, talk about grief, and do that. When we talk about finding the remains of people, there is a lot of that. I think it obviously becomes more and more difficult where we're talking about not only the desert, where a lot of the remains can also disappear or be difficult to find just because of the terrain, but also when we're talking about sea crossings where people when bodies can be lost forever, right? So that it becomes more and more difficult. And what you were saying about the movie that you saw, I think that's very important because people, and perhaps people in the West, we tend to be more like, oh, whatever happens, that's all right. Like I don't care. My family knows that I'm okay. That doesn't matter. They don't need a place. But that's a privilege, and even here in the West, that's a privilege. So finding bodies, or finding proof, irreparable proof that people did die, that they are not only disappeared, also brings closure, and I think that's important because otherwise families are hoping that they may be found one day, that they will return one day. And I think as painful as it is to find the remains of your loved one, it does bring closure in some way or another. And you need a place to mourn, or you need the idea of a place where you know that they are, to be able to mourn and to be able to grieve in a more healthy way. But that doesn't happen. It's heartbreaking that people live in that situation.
Constantly living with ambiguous loss is so
Yeah.
horribly hard. I mean, it's impossible. You can only try to imagine when you're living in the kind of world where people will routinely say to you, I don't care what you do, I don't care, it doesn't matter. It's quite hard to imagine what that would sound like if you were someone who couldn't find their person and had no idea where they were, what kind of, because sometimes people really want to know how their person died, even if it's horrible. They really want to know the details, and that's hard as well, because you never know the story. And so there's a bigger conversation, isn't there, around how do we as human beings mourn for our people when we don't have knowledge around their death, and we don't have, as you call them, their remains, you don't have them back in order to let them go again. I feel that there will be a lot of work done around that, hopefully, because we're learning all the time and we're finding all kinds of different ways of doing that. But that's something that really concerns me, is that we don't really have any alternative ways of interpreting these moments in time for people yet. And I hope we will find ways of looking at our grief and managing that ambiguous loss because clearly many people are just never ever going to find that person. They're just not. It's the fact of it. And what do we do about that? I'd be quite interested to know what kind of work is going on around that. It worries me because of the nature of my work, but I know that not many people have ever, I don't think I've ever had a conversation about it to anybody, even though it does bother me. I've never had that conversation. And you're the first academic I've met who's really concerning themselves with that. So that's a beautiful thing, and I'm really pleased you're doing it. Tell me a little bit about your book. Is that connected with your work?
No, it's not.
Separate
So
thing.
that was it's a separate thing, but I actually do want to write about that in a way that, and obviously there are amazing children's books out there that already talk about that. But I think you do realize that there's a need for more to be out there, because in a world where there's so many books, or so many children's books, so many illustrations, so many everything, what's already there can get a little bit lost. So I think there's a need to keep doing that, to keep writing about loss for children. I would love to be able to write about this kind of loss, this kind of death, also for children, which is very delicate, of course.
You
Knowing how
absolutely
to
must. You must write it. You must. You've got all that knowledge, and
Yeah.
you've got all the connections. You've got so much to offer people. Who else is going to do that? That's your job. You must do it.
And
I mean,
and I sorry, I do have to say that a lot of this is doesn't come from experience, right? I've never worked hand to hand with people who are going through this. But I think and I say this just because I think a lot of people think that there's nothing they can do about the situation. It's out of their hands. They don't even live in border towns, etc. But I think there's value in grieving and in listening to these stories, and looking at them from a human perspective, not from a political perspective, not from a geopolitical perspective, just a human thing that's grieving for these people who didn't deserve to die, no matter their situation. And again, there's international law and there's conventions about this that are supposed to ensure this, and are supposed to ensure that states don't let this happen when it happens at their borders. So I think that's important to comment that A lot of what I talk about, or a lot of what I want to talk about, it's out of that necessity that there's a lot that needs to be done, and people need to know about it. So you don't need to work in migration. You don't need to work with refugees. And that's something that I want people to take away from this, that they can do their part to do this.
You've already inspired me. I think that's really interesting. I think there's a get out clause, isn't there? It's not my personal experience. It's not my cultural experience. I don't have any first-hand experience. I'm not involved. I'm not a part of it. And it is very easy for me to put myself at a distance. Very easy, because I'm not looking at it. It's not in front of me. It's not my experience. And I think there is a tendency to think, I'll leave that to the experts, or I'll leave that to the people that are doing that thing, because that's their thing. What do I know about it? But you're right, we have a common humanity. And it's interesting because I just had a conversation with a guy who is in Guatemala at the moment, but is from LA. And he used the term common ground. He was referring to grief as a place of common ground in a time where we're so divided. And I thought that was so interesting. It is, and they often say that death is the great leveler. And it's true, isn't it? And I think just knowing that we're fellow human beings, and our fellow human beings are losing their people. And when we talk about, oh, I lost my dad in English, is a euphemism for my dad died. But for some people, I lost my person is I literally lost my person. And they might be dead and they might not be dead, and I don't know. And I can't grieve and I can't move on. And it's one of the most complex types of grief that I ever witness is when they're not knowing, because no one says to you, do you need a ceremony? Because in a way that the thing hasn't happened. You've got no proof that it's happened, but it's totally happened, and you don't know if you'll ever see them again. And so you're stuck in this in-between place. There's that, but then there's all these awful deaths that are happening, that are witnessed, that they're not, those people are just not honored. And you don't have to be an expert to honor a life, do you? Or find a way of drawing attention to that dishonoring of human life, that dehumanization. And I think you've reached me, if no one else, by just saying that this isn't my personal experience, but I have had this connection with this and been made aware of this. And I think we should be talking about it. If nothing else, talking about it is great. And again, the man that I spoke to just now, he said it all starts with a conversation. And I think Lifting the Lid Festival is a big conversation. You start having conversations like these that you really wouldn't. You just wouldn't. I haven't had this conversation before. Why have I not had this conversation before? Because not many people have had the courage that you've had to say, in spite of the fact that this is not my personal experience, I want to talk about my fellow human beings and our common ground. And so just coming on and doing that is really, really special. So if you are listening, do come and listen to Paulina, because clearly she has astonishing levels of knowledge, and you've done a lot. You've done a lot. She knows what she's doing and she knows what she's talking about. I've got her bio here and I've read that out. So you'll have a new one. The one that we've got currently needs to be updated. We'll update that before we get there. So come and see. You're looking for Paulina Odeth. Friday the 14th, this Friday, Greenwich Mean Time 3:45 till 4:30. And all the international time zones are on that public program. You can get your tickets from Ticket Taylor in the bio of the Lifting the Lid Instagram. And I will do my best to put links up to everything. Do you have a personal website, Paulina?
No, not at the moment.
Not at the moment. So we've got the other things though. Instagram.com rethinking_refugees I have for your Instagram. Is that no longer relevant? Or is that
that's the organization I used to write for when I was in Poland. So I just wanted it to be there because I think it's relevant, not only for my story but for the work that they were doing.
That makes sense. So you're interested in spreading the word about what's happening out there. So if you want to know more about Rethinking Refugees, you go to Instagram rethinking_refugees. educate yourself there. I will be doing that. And then if you want to find Paulina herself, Instagram.com/Paulina Odeth. So that's in English you say Paulina Odeth, Odeth. Very unusual name. So you'll find her quite quickly, I think.
Sure.
And if you don't, you'll find her. We'll put links to her all over the place so you can strike up your own conversations with her. Please do join her, because it might feel like it feels for me like I can do nothing for my fellow people, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you're wrong, and maybe this is your opportunity to come and find out more about the suffering that's happening that we're not seeing. And let's hope we can make a difference. But I'm so grateful that you could join me, Paulina. It's a real honor to have that conversation with you. And you've already changed a life, because you've made me think about things that I really should have thought about more fully before. And I think that's just vital work. So thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And if you stay on, Paulina, we say goodbye. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.